Hello, BookTube. Welcome to my no frills, plain vanilla, no special editing, no special effects channel. Today I'm going to give a wrap up of all the books that I read in April. And the first book I read was Dream Snake by Vonda N. McIntyre. This was an audiobook, so I don't have anything to show you, but it is a science fiction novel originally written in 1978. And I read it when I was in high school sometime in the early 80s. And it was pretty good, but I didn't remember anything. In 2009, just as the whole ebook craze was kicking off, and Kindle had been released just a year earlier, I got an ebook version from an independent publisher. And I read it, and I thought it was pretty good, put it aside. And then earlier this year, I noticed that Audible has this book available for free. Free if you are a Prime subscriber, which I am. And I decided that I would listen to this book because I wanted to. And it's a fairly decent book. It follows a world that is about 200 years post-apocalyptic after a nuclear war. And it follows the story of Snake, who is a healer. And these healers use snake venom for medicine. Sounds like fantasy, but the author really wants it to be science fiction. And this healer goes to a small village, and she wraps a boy in a dream snake. Now she has three snakes. She has a cobra, a rattlesnake, and the dream snake. The dream snake is actually an alien species. And the venom causes dreams and pleasant effects instead of being poison. And she leaves the snake around the boy's neck while he's resting for night as she's preparing the medicine for him in the morning. And the villagers get really scared and they kill her snake. And this snake is just incredibly rare. They don't breed well in captivity. And she can't really function as a healer without her dream snake. So she has a few options. She can go back to her healing center over the mountains and beg for a new dream snake, which probably is not going to happen because the snakes are so rare. But someone convinces her to go to one of these enclaves. And these enclaves are much more technological, and these people have access to off-worlders, and these off-worlders supposedly have access to the dream snakes. So she wants to go there and beg them for one. And that's part of her journey. And I don't want to get too much into those details, but one of the interesting aspects of this novel is she was considered very forward-thinking in her sexual rights and reproductive rights for women. There is a part later in the novel that focuses on contraceptives for women, and it's a critical point of the plot. And that was very forward-thinking. And there was a comment, I think, on Amazon where someone says, yes, she was very forward-thinking for 1978. And she's still forward-thinking 40 years later. And I find that very sad to think that we have not made any progress in some parts of this world after 40 years. So on the audiobook, the narrator, for the most part, does a very good job. But one of the characters in this book is a 12-year-old girl. And the narrator is a middle-aged woman. And she just does not do a 12-year-old girl very well. It's a very grating sound to the voice. And I found it very annoying. And it would have been just much better if she just spoke in a normal voice, the way some audiobooks narrated do. But all in all, I do recommend it. The second book, I have a copy. Notes from Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This is the Peaver and Volokhonsky translation. Now, I have read this book numerous times when I was in college. I think I had to read it twice. Once for a class in Russian literature and translation, and again for philosophy and literature. And this book just wiped me out and blew my mind when I was a college student. The first part of the book is basically a philosophical treatise of a man obsessed with consciousness. One of the professors described it as a paralyzing effect. If a man is given a choice between A and B, and he is a fully conscious man, there is no possible way he can make that choice because the choice is paralyzing and devastating. And this book just wiped me out when I first read it. When I finally read this new translation, I still enjoyed it, but I was much older, and it did not affect me the way it did when I was young. Now, one of the things these translators do is they want to make Dostoevsky sound as he sounds in Russian in English. And apparently Dostoevsky was not a very good stylist. When I was much younger, I worked in a bookstore, and one of the booksellers was from Moscow, and he described Dostoevsky as having hooks in his style. And while he could never really explain what that hook is, I think it had something to do with the way you do your Russian verbs, and I don't know Russian, so I can't explain it. But that's what he said. But he was a terrible writer. In Crime and Punishment, there is a scene in Raskolnikov's garret, and he has this table that's described as round and oval in their translation. And most translators are just going to say, okay, let's make this table round or make it oval. But in the original Russian, it's round and oval. So they are correct to say the table is round and oval. But it makes for awkward reading because Dostoevsky is just an awkward writer. But I highly recommend it if you have not read it. Next is Like Flies from Afar by K. Ferrari, translated from the Spanish by Adrian Nathan West. Now this is a crime novel following an oligarch named Louis Manchi. And he is a cocaine addict. And he has $10 million. And he drives a BMW. I think it's a BMW. I don't really pay that much attention to automobile type brands, but it's a very expensive car. And in the morning, he wakes up and calls his wife, says, I'm coming home, I want a big breakfast on my table. The wife is all upset with him, and he insists. And then he starts driving home, and he gets a flat tire on the highway. And he tries to call the tow truck services, and they give him a lot of lip, and they're not showing up fast enough. So he goes out to the trunk to try to replace the spare himself, and he finds a dead body in that trunk. And that dead body is handcuffed to the inside of the trunk. And those handcuffs are sex toys he uses with prostitutes, where he will play bondage games with them. So he knows someone is after him. And the rest of the day does not improve after he finds that dead body. Now, one of the other comments I've read on the internet is a lot of readers complain about the swear words. I did not particularly notice an abundance of swear words. Yes, they were there, but it's a crime novel and people swear, and it just flows like water off a duck's back to me when I see swear words. But some people do strongly complain about that. But I hope they do translate more of this author's work because I enjoyed it very much. Next was Wretchedness by Andrzej Tichy. He is a Polish immigrant to Sweden, and this book revolves around a cellist who's waiting for some companions down by a canal one day and runs into a homeless man. And the homeless man begs for money and begs for cigarettes, and they have a brief encounter, and then they just go on their own way. Now, what happens after that is that you just get a flood of memories of this cellist. And then something strange happens. You start reading it and say, these don't seem like the cellist's memories. And then you realize you're getting the homeless man's memories mixed in. And the author very deliberately does not give you keys to whose memories you are reading. As a reader, you have to pick up on that. And that makes it for a complicated read. But I did enjoy that. And this book has been nominated for the International Booker Prize for 2021, or is it 2020? But it's nominated. You can pick it up. It's very good. The next book was Colonel Roosevelt by Edmund White. This is a third biography completing the life of Teddy Roosevelt. Now, I read the first book in this biography last year in March. It's called The Rise of Teddy Roosevelt. And it is a fabulous biography. It's one of the best biographies I've ever read. I listened to that on an audiobook as well. And that takes Teddy Roosevelt from birth until the assassination of McKinley when he becomes president. The second book, called Theodore Rex, just covers his presidency. And rather oddly, I thought his life wasn't as interesting when he was president as when he wasn't president. And the third novel covers his life post-presidency. It starts off with a safari trip to Africa that lasts a few months. And Theodore Roosevelt was a big hunter. He thought it was very manly to hunt game, much in the same way that Hemingway thought it was very manly to hunt game. But once he returns to the United States, as a little time goes on, he noticed that his hand-picked replacement, Taft, is not doing quite as well of a job as he thought he would. He had left the presidency after his second term, and he was basically offered a third term if he wanted it. And he says, no, George Washington said to presidents that presidents only have 2 terms. And he stuck with it. But as Taft was doing a worse and worse job in his mind, he decided to run. And he tried to take the Republican nomination away from Taft, but didn't get it. So then he started a third Bull Moose party. And again, he ran. And there's some evidence pretty much that Taft and Roosevelt split the vote, and that gave Wilson the Democratic presidency. So after his failed attempt, he decided he needed to do something. And what he did was go on an exploration down an Amazon tributary. And this tributary had not been explored before. You know, on maps, you saw a tributary, and there was a blank space in the map, and below that blank space, there was another little river that came out. And someone says, I bet these 2 rivers meet up. But it had not been proven. And Roosevelt went on this trip, and things did not go well. He got very, very ill. But it's a fabulous journey. And if you like that, I can highly recommend this book by Candice Millard. This biography focuses almost solely on his Amazon trip. And it is one of the best nonfiction books that I've ever read. So I can highly recommend that. After that, I read Foregone by Russell Banks. Again, that was a digital book, so I don't have a copy to show you. And Russell Banks is a very well-known author. I've never read anything by him. He was 79 or 80 years old when he wrote this. So this is like an end-of-career novel, I suppose. And it follows the life of a documentary filmmaker who has advanced cancer and has weeks or days left to live. And other documentary filmmakers want to make a film of him talking about his filmmaking techniques. And they go to a hotel in Canada, and they set up the camera. And the narrator goes totally off script. He starts talking about his life in America before he had immigrated to Canada, and no one knew anything about this life. And they wonder whether he's telling the truth. Is this just all made up fantasy? Because it's the form of a confession to his wife, and he insists that his wife always be in the room as he's telling this story. And it's shocking. Well, he thinks it's shocking, and maybe other reasons. I mean, his life is just an ordinary, I had other wives first. And it's very interesting. And at one point, about midway, in the book, he starts on this rant about how devastating he feels with cancer. And I've known people who've had stage 4 cancer, and it's a pure ranting anger that they almost all go through. And I just read this and I thought it was very brilliantly done. And just some of the descriptions of them setting up these techniques to film him as he was narrating this sort of inspired me to start this channel. And that was not Wretched, that was Foregone. After Foregone, I listened to another audiobook called The Blue Flower by Penelope Fitzgerald. This is another book that was written late in the author's life. I think she was 79 or 78 when she wrote it. And this was recommended by a booktuber on the channel Leaf by Leaf. And after watching that video, I checked out Audible, and I noticed that Audible had it for free. So I decided, I'm going to listen to this book. And it's the story of the German poet, novelist, before he started writing poetry. And a story of him, this wild infatuation with a 12-year-old girl. Now, this is not a sexual infatuation. It was just total him thinking he has found his muse in a woman. Now, the problem is, I don't think this book was really suitable as an audiobook. Some books just don't do well, just with the pacing and the storytelling style, and I think this is one of them. I mean, I did enjoy it, but I think I would have gotten a lot more out of it if I had actually read the book or the ebook version. Finally, we have The High Window by Raymond Chandler. Sometime in 2020, I read a book, and I don't remember which one the title it was, but one of the characters walked into a library and pulled out a Raymond Chandler novel to spend an afternoon reading, and they had a paragraph or two just describing how much she enjoyed Raymond Chandler. And I had read The Big Sleep before, but I'd never gone beyond The Big Sleep. So January of this year, I looked on my shelf and I saw my Library of America edition and said, hey, I'm gonna read the next one. So I read Farewell, My Lovely. And I thoroughly enjoyed Farewell, My Lovely. It's Chandler's world is just masterly. And then just this month I decided, well, let's go on to the next Philip Marlowe story. So I picked up The High Window. And this is an interesting story where Philip Marlowe is called in to a very rich woman, and she is a widow, and she's a very nasty woman. And one of the dialogues is, she goes to Philip Marlowe, I don't think you like me very much. And Philip Marlowe replies, does anybody like you very much? And she's just quiet for a moment and just bursts out laughing, and that was just a wonderful scene. But the setup of this story is that her son has made a bad choice in marriage, and the wife has left, but she has stolen her deceased husband's gold doubloon. And this gold doubloon is in mint condition, and it's worth $10,000, even though the gold itself is only worth $20. And she says, I want you to go back to that woman and get my doubloon back, but don't involve the police. And of course, things are not quite what they seem in these kind of mystery novels. And it's just very well done. And if you haven't read Philip Marlowe before, I would read it. I would start with The Big Sleep and just work my way through. I intend to go on to the next books in a few months. I don't know if I'll go any further because series do tend to peter out somewhere between book 4 and book 6. But I hope it remains good. And that is what I have read for April. If you have managed to sit through my ramblings for all these 19 minutes, I thank you. Goodbye, BookTube.